It's interesting that Herb touched on the idea of the diversity here in the United States, because that is basically how I was going to open up this morning, because, and it still is actually, the United States was actually the first nation born out of the idea that the people had the capacity to totally govern themselves. And part of that freedom that we had when we came here was the freedom to choose to worship how we wish, or not, right? The American Legion magazine wrote this: America is strengthened by ideals which were not conjured by kings or dictators. These ideals were not contrived to protect the rich, rank one religion over another, or to support an elite minority. Rather, these ideals were founded on freedom, the principle that society is better off when ordinary people are given the ways and means to achieve extraordinary goals. And we are a nation of such people. And I just thought that was beautiful, and I think that Herb really touched on that with his talk. And that's what the 4th of July tends to be about, is remembering those ideals, remembering why we came to be a nation in the first place. We're also a nation of people who at one point or another, as Herb pointed out, came from another country, making us far more ethnically diverse than many, many other nations, which also makes us among the first to create that unity in the diversity. The complexity of our diversity has created a really unique perspective in our culture. For example, if we choose to, we can celebrate any ethnic festival we want. And we do a lot of that here. We can celebrate St. Patrick's Day. We can celebrate Cinco de Mayo. We can celebrate Chinese New Year. And we don't have to be Irish, Mexican, or Chinese to do that, right? We have the freedom to be. We have the freedom to celebrate every day of the year because it's a gift from God. And we do take advantage of that. On the other hand, what I found really interesting is, regardless of where their heritage originates, most people seem to recognize and celebrate the 4th of July. And I think that is just really fascinating and interesting. So whether they're immigrants or just visiting for a little while, they're celebrating with us. And I think it really is all about celebrating that freedom of choice, that freedom to be who we are and to do what we wish. Now, most of us associate freedom with choice, with being able to do whatever it is we want to do. That common understanding, however, is how our ego understands it, how our ego defines freedom. And that definition can actually imprison us with limitation, because it shows up as a cycle again and again of our desires. Not thy will, mine. Freedom, from the standpoint of a mystic, for instance, is a quality of being. And our work is to bring the beneficial inner qualities of our soul, that ideal of freedom, to the outer world, to share that with the world, to share it with other people, to move from that idea of I, it's all about me, to that idea of we, it's about us. So we're looking at that freedom not simply as an ideal, as a very real truth. So true freedom can free us from the illusion that success in life means having everything we want, when we want it. We can learn to open up and relate to life in a different way than that. We can allow life to respond to us in ways that aren't conditioned by our ego-centered mind. The truth is, life gives us what we need all the time on all levels. And what we often need is different from what we want. Have you ever found that out? We learn through that particular lesson that when we we want to surrender our desires to that higher place, to that love, to God, to Source, to Spirit. And it's that action of surrender that gives us that access to true freedom. Sri Shimnoy wrote this: we fight for our outer freedom, we cry for our inner freedom. With the outer freedom, we see and rule the four corners of the globe. With the inner freedom, we see the soul and become the goal of the entire universe. Right? We just open up and share that love. The act of being in service is one way that we can express that true freedom, because we're giving ourselves freely to life. We're saying, thy will be done. Guide me, direct me, show me. We are at that point, we are aspiring to live in that oneness, to live in that oneness and with every endeavor that we undertake. And that's very different from the collective attitude of freedom in our Western culture, doing what we want without giving thought to, say, consequences, or how it may affect somebody else. Collectively, our understanding of freedom is conditioned by the ego's drama of choice and imposition. And what I mean by that is we choose what we want, and then we impose our will on others and on our environment to ensure our desires, our personal I desires, are satisfied. That's not a good thing. And I think that Herb really pointed out, too, that as a nation, that is not who we are. However, we do see that in our culture. True freedom is so far beyond that kind of attitude. It never imposes itself, never, because it respects the integrity of all life. True freedom belongs to love. Love can't be stolen, it can't be imprisoned, it cannot be imposed, and it cannot be controlled. We can't dominate with love because love comes through giving of self. And true freedom, which is born of that love, is indeed our essential nature. The desire within love is not to possess something. It's to give ourselves more fully to that love, to be more open. The way the mystics do that is they let go of everything except love. They empty themselves completely, and they come only from that place of love. They merge themselves into that God source. And that's where that true freedom is, beyond our ego, beyond all patterns of control and domination, beyond all conditions. And when we see the physical world with the eyes of our desire, we experience that constriction, that limitation. In a world of duality, we struggle often to have what we want. And we often come up against that frustration of not getting what we want when we want it. If we approach life with the eyes of oneness, a different dynamic takes place. We recognize the unlimited nature of life. We step into the freedom of the soul while we're here in this physical world. It's like we crack ourselves open. And while we might feel that we're being denied what it is we want, we can still see and experience the abundance that's all around us. The mystic knows and understands that God comes to us and through us in countless ways, and not always in the ways that we expect. Llewellyn Vaughan Lee wrote this: "He who is always with us appears in many guises, sometimes in hunger and in pain, and sometimes in love or warmth." When we recognize freedom in this physical world, knowing that we know that we are part of that unfolding of wholeness, and then when we are in that space, we see life very differently. We have a greater appreciation, a better understanding. And to do that, we have to leave behind that attitude of our physical world, and let go of the idea that that physical world is here to benefit me personally and give me everything I want, because it is always about we. Our needs are always met, and we can see it much more clearly when we're in that space of connecting with our higher self, with our source. Life will always give us what we need, even if it does come in the guise of that hunger and pain. Inner freedom, true freedom from the grip of the ego and its illusion, is realized through discipline, through devotion to our spiritual practices. And that isn't always easy to stay in that place. I get that. However, it is really important for us to stay connected to life, to understand the truth. Because the rewards of freedom are great. Because when we live in freedom, we truly become the very best that we can be. The best human being that we can be. The deepest freedom that we can experience comes from surrender. And that freedom isn't something that's won. It's available when we're ready to accept. It's available when we're ready to say, okay. It is what it is. Let it be. Our particular culture has become really focused on the external, and we have forgotten that freedom and love come from the inner, from the internal. And in some cases, we've even forgotten how to access it, how to access that freedom, that love, that connection to life. Meditation, any technique really that works for you to clear your mind of clutter, allows you to hear that voice of your higher self, to feel and experience that connection with your source, and access that inner space. That space that's not already conditioned with that external stuff. Because we all do have that within us. There is something within us that is pure and clean and unconditional, pure love. And that's the place that we want to tap into. Within you and I, there's an energy. Within the world, with all of life, there is an energy. And that energy moves with its own agenda. And that's that energy of life, that life force energy. It doesn't know distinctions between countries, between people, between color, race, religion. It has no idea. It doesn't care. It doesn't follow any well-established path for anything or anybody. And that energy is the life force of this entire planet. And it is one energy source. We can intentionally work with that energy by aligning ourselves with it, by allowing it to guide us, by allowing it to direct us toward that inner feeling, toward opening up to that love. We're living in a time where barriers between countries and people are struggling. You probably haven't noticed. But you and I, are being called as lovers of light and knowers of the truth, and understanders, I know that's not a word, of truth. We are being called to that oneness, that interconnectedness, to know that, to participate in birthing a different time, knowing a different truth, knowing that we're all one, that we're all connected. And we do that by being an example, by being the change that we wish to see. Not by complaining about it, not by yelling at our TV. We do that by being the change that we want to see in this world, like Gandhi said. We know the freedom of every individual is directly linked to the freedom of the whole. Freedom never comes at the expense of other beings. Freedom respects the integrity of all. Know that freedom is your true essential nature, because truly it is. That's who you are. That's what you are made of, that love, that ideal freedom. The essence of life resonates with you through joy and through freedom, and a simplicity of simply being alive with the energy of love that lies within you. Release your light to the world, because when you do that, you will realize others will realize and experience that freedom through you. And as you do that, just breathe through it. Find yourself staying present with it. Relax into it, because that is the truth of who you are. So in closing, I want to invite you to take this thought with you today. You have within you the desire, the ability, and the strength to live this freedom. So choose freedom, nourish it, support it, and that freedom will bring a richness to this world through you. Thank you so much for being here while I shared this truth as I understand it.